what's up, Slunts? Joker here. Today is May the 19th, 2015, which means it is finally the release date for Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, a game that I have been anticipating ever since I completed The Witcher 2 a few years ago. One of the best RPGs I have ever played, hands down, despite the fact that it wasn't a complete open world like The Witcher 3 now is. So they really have evolved, the franchise between the three different games. There's been so many changes between 1 and 2 with the vast changes to the combat and the feel of the game, and now evolving that even further between 2 and 3 to include an open world and improving upon the combat, at least in my opinion, and we'll touch on that in just a little bit. But first, I want to go ahead and take a look at the options menu, just like I like to do in all of my performance reviews. And after that, we're going to talk about performance on a single GTX 980, two GTX 980s, and at 1080p and 1440p. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a leap into the options menu. But if this isn't your sort of thing and you just want to see the rest of the video, then I will put a timestamp on the video here as well as down somewhere in the description or the comments below. So if you don't want to see the options menu, I completely understand, and you'll be able to go ahead and skip ahead to later in the video for that. Okay, so first up in the options menu is going to be the audio, which really isn't too stellar. We've got sliders for master, music, effects, and voice volume, which is nice to see. But as I mentioned in almost every one of my videos, is I want to see options for switching between various types of audio devices, as it does affect how games actually sound. If you have an option in here to go between headphones, TV, surround sound 2.1, all those various different audio types of outputs, it drastically changes how the game will sound depending on what device you're listening to, if the game gives you the option to do so. That's something I would have liked to seen included in this, but otherwise, this is pretty much they have pretty much excellent options besides this, and it really is just nitpicking. Coming down to control settings, you can see we've got different sliders for in-game, action, looking around, stuff like that, versus in the menus, which is really nice to see. I really, really like that. I did notice sort of like a bit of mouse acceleration when I first turned on the game, but there is a way to turn that off, and I'll touch on that in just a minute, because it's actually in a really odd place. It's in the video options of all things. But beyond that, we've got the ability to invert the camera for your mouse, as well as a controller if you're using an Xbox controller. I'm personally playing on the mouse and keyboard, but with an action-adventure title like this, I could understand if some people want to play with a controller, but personally, I just prefer to play, with mouse and keyboard, because you have your different swords, you have all of your different combat abilities mapped to the num keys up along the top, so I feel like I can get between those abilities a lot quicker using the mouse and keyboard personally, but it's going to be up to your personal preference. You can adjust your right stick sensitivity. Once again, that's for your camera if you're using a controller, as well as a separate slider for aiming, which is nice to see. Finally, you can turn vibration on and off. Once again, that's a controller only specific thing. Coming down to controller scheme, you've got, your control scheme basically for if you are using a controller. You can't really switch between any different options here as far as the mapping of buttons on a controller. It just kind of shows you what the buttons are and basically what you're going to have to deal with, since you can't go ahead and actually change any of the button mappings on the controller. Coming down to key bindings, though, it's a completely different story, as you have fully remappable key bindings. You can go ahead and remap everything in here, and they have all the actions listed and the keys. I would have liked to have seen the ability to put secondary buttons for certain things, but other than that, it is, it's good. They've got everything in here that you can go ahead and you can toggle. You can map things to your mouse 4 and 5 buttons. You can map stuff to middle mouse button. So those are the kinds of things that I do like to see in a good PC game, and this is, a good PC game. It's not a port. This is, a PC game first and foremost, and, if anything, it was ported to consoles and not the other way around, despite what some people have actually said in the comments, thinking it's a console port, and I don't get that. It's definitely not. CD Projekt Red has always been a PC developer first and a console developer second, as The Witcher 2 didn't come out on console until years later, and then Witcher 1 didn't, come out at all. So you got your fully remappable key bindings in here. Like I said, I would have liked to have seen the ability to map secondary keys, but just kind of nitpicking there. Coming down now, we've got your gameplay. Not too much in here, just basically you can turn off your on-screen tutorials and turn on or off automatic finishers. Not too much in there, really, honestly, as far as gameplay options are concerned. When you're actually in-game, you can go ahead and change the difficulty via that gameplay option menu, but that's pretty much it. Alright guys, but now it is time to finally get into the good stuff, the video options. Definitely my favorite thing to go over. Last night when I did try to stream, this was like the first thing I did was I jumped straight into the video options, and if you were there for the stream, you saw that I had some issues getting the stream to work with SLI. It wasn't really necessarily a game issue, because SLI works in the game just fine. It was just between streaming and SLI, some kind of weird issue, and I haven't tried testing it again today. I'm going to try later on to see if I can actually stream the game. But that's besides the point. Let's go ahead, jump into the video options here. First up, we got HUD configuration. You can pretty much turn on and off every single different element of the HUD to tweak it to your liking. You can change the HUD size from small to large, so it's just really two options there. I would have liked to have seen more of an advanced slider to be able to move it up and down all the way. They just got two options there, those small and large, which kind of begs the question as to why it's even actually a slider when it's just two options. You got your action log, so if you got like different things, like different actions you're performing in the game, it'll have like a almost kind of like a kill feed that will show up. You can turn that on and off. Like I said, everything in the HUD you can turn on and off. So if you want no HUD, if you just want complete immersion, you can go ahead, turn the HUD completely off. That's up to you. You can do whatever you want. You've got minimap in here, rotate minimap, which is really nice to see that you can change that to on or off depending on your preference. I like to be able to have the minimap rotate. I've played games in the past where the minimap did not rotate and you didn't have an option for it, and I found it really disorienting and difficult to figure out which way I was actually supposed to be heading. So nice that they do have the rotate mini map on by default, but then again, if it's your preference to play it the other way, then you totally can, which is just awesome. I loved being able to have that level of customization, because if I was on the latter side of that and I did want to have rotate mini map off, then really, really good to see that option there. Witcher senses on minimap. This was off by default, and what this basically does is this game kind of has almost like a Batman detective mode, where if you hold right mouse, it'll highlight certain objects of interest in the world, and if you put this on, then it will show those objects on the minimap rather than just in the 3D space around you, which is actually really nice. I wound up putting that on because I found it helped me out a lot, because sometimes I could tell that I was detecting items, but I couldn't necessarily see what they were, so putting this option on with the minimap I felt helped me out a lot. Path to objectives on minimap. This is kind of like your GPS, and I've honestly been toying with the idea of turning this off, because in Witcher 2, this is like one of those things they didn't have, which kind of made it a little bit more difficult, as you were kind of left with left to your own devices to navigate around the world. But they do have this here, and I have it on right now, but I might turn it off. And it's basically just a GPS, so when you set a waypoint marker or an active objective, they'll put little dots on the minimap so you can see where you're supposed to be going. Undiscovered point of interests on minimap. These basically show up as question marks when you're going around the world, and it's just, different things you can go and interact with and discover around the world as you're just going through there. NPC chatter, active quests, display Witcher medallion and stat bars, display current buffs, which is like, if they have like these sort of like these idols around in the world that you can go interact with, and then it will give you a buff for a period of time, like a half hour. It'll give you like your Quen ability for like 30 minutes or so. It varies based on the time and the different abilities you will, or the buffs you will get by interacting with these idols. So if you want, you can, like I said, you can remove that from the HUD if you don't want to see it up there all the time, because it does kind of interfere and get in the way, and I might actually turn that off. Breath remaining bar. This is basically for when you're swimming underwater so you don't die, and I think that's important information. I think I'll go ahead and leave that one on. Info messages, control hints, damaged items, which is nice in case you are taking damage to your weapons or your armor and you need to know before you got to get to a blacksmith before it becomes completely broken. Additional equipment, location, date, and display in cutscenes, because there is up in the top right by the minimap, it shows you like the date and the time, so because which actually does help you out in certain circumstances. There are certain enemy types that will only show up at certain times of day. There are these noon rates, and they're aptly named because they only show up at noon, so it's kind of important to know the time in the world. But if you want to turn that off in just cutscenes, then you totally can. Boss health bars, enemy health bars, boat durability, companion portrait, and finally horse fear bar, all pretty much self-explanatory stuff. Just more HUD options that you could turn on and off at your will, depending on, you know, how much, hand-holding, I guess, you want, or how much information you want to get from the game. Or you can, you could turn all that stuff off if you just want a more hardcore experience, and it to be more immersive. And I haven't messed around with these too much, so I might actually go in and turn some of these on and off, because some of them do sound interesting, like they could actually really affect gameplay by turning them off. Rescaling the HUD, you can go ahead and adjust the HUD size if you want. I found the HUD size at small was okay with the HUD configuration. When I set it to small was fine. But if you want to go ahead and resize it more to your liking, then you can totally do that. Coming down to post-processing effects, this is where we start to get into sort of the advanced options here. Scroll up to the top. You can see what you do. You can set low, medium, or high presets if you want. And going through here, these are the settings that I'm personally using when I'm gaming. But when I give you my performance numbers later on, that's going to be based on everything cranked all the way up. Motion blur and blur I do have off, just because I don't like those options. I just don't like the way they look. It has nothing to do with performance. From what I can tell, they don't really impact performance at all. It's just a personal preference of mine to not want to look at that. Anti-aliasing, just on or off. This is a little bit of an odd one. According to the config of the game, this is MSAA, so it's multi-sample anti-aliasing, and you can actually go into the configs and you can adjust this based on whatever value you want, 1 times, 2 times, 4 times, 8 times, what have you. I'm not sure what the exact limit is on that yet. I've checked PCGamingWiki.com to see if they have any details about this, but unfortunately I don't know the limit of how high you can set MSAA right now, but I do know the anti-aliasing in the game is MSAA, and I would have liked to have seen this option, have a slider or a multiplier in the menus, and it's kind of disappointing that it's just on or off. We also have bloom and sharpening, which can go on and off. Ambient occlusion, you've got none. SSAO, which is not as taxing, and then finally HBAO plus, which is obviously an Nvidia Gameworks specific feature. So if you are using Nvidia, you can go ahead and use that option. It helps improve the shadows quite a bit in the game. Depth of field, on or off. Chromatic aberration, I actually covered this in a previous video where I explained what chromatic aberration is. It's basically an effect in film and photography that you basically try to avoid at all costs, but for some reason game developers have decided to start including this in games as like a feature. But I think it looks ugly, and a lot of gamers are in agreement upon that, chromatic aberration does not look very good. So I've chose to turn that off. Just once again, personal preference for looks of the game, not necessarily impacting performance one way or the other. And that was the same case with vignetting. It's just another visual effect that I don't like to have on, so I've gone ahead and turned that off. But doesn't really affect gameplay performance at all. And finally, light shafts, which I have on because, well, light shafts look absolutely fucking gorgeous. Alright, so now that we've done post-processing, let's go ahead and jump into the main graphics options menu. Yes, it has 2 different graphics options menu here, the post-processing and the regular graphics menu. You can go ahead and you can put VSync on or off. Obviously, I run that off because I am using G-Sync, and that's just a requirement to use G-Sync. You have to have VSync off in the game. Maximum frame rates per second, you can do this unlimited, 30 or 60. You can't set it manually to like 120 or 144, but you can just set it to unlimited, and then you're basically unhinged, because I've seen with the settings on low, my frames went over like 200 FPS. You can toggle between different displays in game, which is nice. So if you wanted to switch over to like a TV or something, or just a different display at your desk, then you can totally go ahead and do that. Resolution, I'm running at 1920 by 1080 right now because I returned my ROG Swift. If you've been following me, you know I had the Swift. I sent that back. I'm getting the Acer XB27HU something. I can't remember the exact model number. But right now I'm running at 1920 by 1080, but using DSR, I did test 1440. So I'm going to give you my thoughts on the performance numbers to 1440 just a little later on. And obviously in here they do have support all the way up to 3840 by 2160. So Ultra HD, aka 4K, for people that are misinformed like to call it, even though it is just Ultra HD. Display mode, you've got windowed, you've got borderless, full screen, and full screen. Nvidia Hairworks. This is one of the most taxing options in this game, and I'm going to touch on that later, specifically in regards to single GTX 980 performance. But you can go on and off. You can put it on for just Geralt, or you can put it on fully, which then it'll have it on Geralt. It'll have it on animals in the world like the Griffin, and you know, all different characters and beasts in the world like wolves, things like that. So putting it on all the way definitely does tax the system, and if you are having some performance issues as an Nvidia user, then this is going to be one of those options that you're going to want to consider turning down or off completely. Number of background characters, you can, obviously the rest of these are just basically low to ultra, as you can toggle them. Number of background characters, shadow quality, terrain quality, water, grass density, texture quality, foliage visibility range. This is actually another one of those really taxing options. If you're having any trouble with performance, this is one of those things you're going to want to consider possibly turning down, because I did notice putting it down to high, I got a boost of about 10 to 15 frames per second, which is pretty significant. If you're, you know, running a little bit lower spec system, like maybe like a single 970, and you're getting like 40 to 45 FPS, and you want to get that bump up to 60 without really impacting visuals too much, then this is one of those options you can just turn down one level to high, and it's really not going to affect the way the game looks all that much, but it will give you a nice boost in performance. Detail level, hardware cursor, and this is the one I was talking about earlier with mouse acceleration. For whatever reason, they put this in the graphics option menu, which is kind of weird, but this hardware cursor option, I found by putting it on, made the game feel a lot smoother and more responsive. When you put it off, it feels like there's almost kind of like a mouse acceleration, and the mouse is just moving way too fast. And I was trying to adjust my sensitivity between the DPI settings on my mouse and in-game to try to get it match up to something that was comfortable for me, but I just couldn't find you know, an appropriate setting until I went ahead and switched this on at the suggestion of Gopher, who's a YouTuber, really great PC YouTuber. At his suggestion, I went ahead and turned hardware cursor on, and since I have, I'm a lot happier with it, because the controls do feel a lot more responsive and a lot more accurate, and it feels like it's gotten rid of the little bit of mouse acceleration that I did feel like was in the game by default. But that's going to wrap it up for the options menu. Let's go ahead now and jump into some gameplay and talk about the overall performance that I've experienced on my system between two 980s and one 980, as well as some 1440p performance numbers. As we could see there, CD Projekt Red did a pretty bang-up job on delivering an options menu that, you know, I would love to see in pretty much every game. I mean, pretty much like 10 out of 10 IGN for CD Projekt Red on that options menu. You can customize that HUD to your liking, whichever way you want. You can have everything turned on. You can turn off certain elements. You can turn off all of the elements to your heart's content. You've got loads of graphics options, so you can be able to get this game to run well on a whole variety of systems, and I'm really pleased with the options menu that they've given us here. Pretty much had every single thing that I could have possibly asked for, with exception to not being able to switch between different audio devices and that anti-aliasing on and off, which is kind of a weird one. Not sure why they didn't do a slider there for anti-aliasing or a multiplier. Would have liked to have seen that, but besides that, fantastic options menu. Very pleased with it. And hopefully, if you are out there running like a lower mid-range system, you can go ahead and tweak some of these options to be able to get it to run as well as possible for you on your specific setup, and hopefully get 60 FPS. Now let's go ahead and talk about performance for The Witcher 3 on my specific system. Now, as I mentioned, I did test this game mostly on my two 980s at 1080p, but I also did take some time aside to go ahead and test it on a single card, since I know not a lot of people out there can afford to run two 980s in SLI, and people just kind of want to know what single GPU performance is like. And I also took the time to do some 1440 benchmarking on the dual cards. I didn't test 1440 on a single 980, but I did test it on two cards, and overall I'm ecstatic with the performance of this game. I think the optimization is just absolutely excellent. On two 980s, the SLI scaling is just fantastic. Some of the best SLI scaling I've ever seen in a game. I barely have ever noticed any point where my GPUs have dipped below 90% usage on each card, and that is something I always look for in games. And even when you come into areas where it gets really, really taxing, and I can see my frame rate coming down to around like the 60 FPS mark, the graphics cards are still scaling very well. So I don't feel like I'm being limited by, you know, poor SLI profile or poor optimization there. It just really is that taxing because the game world is absolutely stunning. The, you know, from, you know, going outside in the open world and seeing, you know, all of the beautiful trees and the lush grass and everything in the world, it just looks absolutely fantastic. Some of the best visuals I have ever seen in an open world game. And that the only thing I would exclude from that is the water. The water in this game does not look great. And that's to put it nicely. I mean, the water in this game is pretty terrible. I'll be 100% honest about that. The water in this game does not look great. And it's a shame because a lot of the world is covered in water, but beyond the water, the rest of the world is pretty much beautiful, and I honestly can't even wrap my head around how smoothly this game is running because of all of these world elements. In other games where I've seen the level of foliage and, you know, like trees and the tall grass, like and like fields of wheat and things, in other games I feel like the frame rate would just absolutely tank there, and I also don't feel that in those areas that the world would have been as interactable, meaning like when you're walking through the grass and these wheat fields, you know, the grass and the wheat is bending and moving as you walk through it. It's just absolutely phenomenal, and I haven't seen a level of that detail since like Crisis 1. If you remember back then, you could like walk through trees and bushes and they would actually move around your body, and this is like the first time since then that I've actually seen that level of detail in an open world game, and this is a much bigger open world than Crisis 1 had. It's absolutely massive. I'm still in the main starting area, and that place is pretty huge, and I can only imagine how much bigger it's going to get when I start going to the other areas. So running on two 980s, as far as my performance numbers are concerned, running at 1080p with everything maxed out. This is not what the options that I went over. I showed you I had like motion blur and blur off and vignetting. For my purpose of testing, I did go ahead and put everything up to the max, just, you know, for consistency with other people, so they can say, oh, what they're getting at Ultra. And this is with Gameworks features, Geralt's hair, and everything turned all the way up, cranked up to the max at 1080p. I'm averaging between 70 and 90 frames per second, but it's mostly up around that 90 FPS mark, but sometimes it drops down to around 80. And when you go indoors and there's a lot more detail inside with like characters and things on the screen, I've seen the frames drop to around 65 to 70 area. But for the most part, running around in the world, I'm getting an absolutely stellar experience, running silky smooth. And the video memory, my God, I don't know what they've done to be able to get this game to use so little video memory, but it is using at 1080p under 2 gigabytes of video memory consistently. It's using like 1.6 to 1.8 gigabytes of video memory, which is just fucking mind-blowing. With the level of detail in this world and the textures on the armor and all of that intricate detail, I don't know how they managed to pull this off. But the game looks incredible, and it's scaling well, and I have like literally like no complaints there in regards to SLI performance and video memory usage. I mean, if you're running a 2 gigabyte card, you should be pretty much okay. I mean, I can't guarantee that you'll have enough horsepower to be able to push this game, because it does require a decent amount of horsepower, but as far as video memory is concerned, a 2 gigabyte card on this game for 1080p should be just absolutely fine, because it runs fantastic. It's just not taxing the VRAM, and I don't know what they've done, and I don't know why other games can't do this. It's actually kind of frustrating in a sense, because I see other games pushing over 3 gigabytes, over 4 gigabytes of video memory, like Shadow of Mordor, which doesn't even come close to the level of detail that this game has, and that thing uses like fucking 6 gigs of video memory. I don't know what they've done, but they have just done an amazing job in regards to the video memory specifically, and it's just running so well. I did go ahead and drop it down to a single card for a little while, and I ran around in the open world and tested that out. And even with a single card, this is with completely max settings, it did drop down to around 50 frames. But if I just went ahead and turned off one option, which was the Nvidia Hairworks, if I turned that off and didn't have it on Geralt's hair, just completely off, which doesn't really affect the looks of the world that much at all, except for just hair. Just hair. So if you turn that off, you are going to be getting over 60 frames on a single 980 at 1080p. I was getting about 60 to 70 frames with that one option turned off on a single card, which it's just still mind-blowing that they've been able to get this level of optimization out of the game, and I could see why the game was delayed and pushed back, and, you know, I'm glad that it was, because they just did a fucking bang-up job in regards to performance, and the gameplay and story and all that matches up with it as well. It's not like that, you know, it's not like the game just runs well and the rest of it is shit. The whole game is fantastic. Great gameplay, great story, great combat. You know, the combat has evolved from Witcher 2, you know, a little bit, not to stray too far from it, but I feel like they've done just enough to improve upon it without completely abandoning, you know, the combat system from Witcher 2, but I think they've improved it enough to make it more accessible to a lot of people, because some people did have complaints about the combat in Witcher 2. But let's get back to the performance. Like I said, on a single 980 1080p, getting like around 60 to 70 FPS, solid, with that Nvidia, with the Hairworks feature turned off. But if you do put it on, you're going to see drops down to around 45 or 50, which you may personally be willing to put up with. Personally, I'm not. I'd rather have the 60 FPS solid, and if I was running on a single 980, then I would definitely go ahead and just turn off Hairworks, and the game would still look absolutely gorgeous, and it would run phenomenally. So the last thing I was going to touch on here was 1440p performance, as that was of particular interest to me, because I'm still waiting for my Acer monitor to come in, the Swift monitor's return to actually process. But once I get my Acer XB270HU, I am going to be running this game in 1440p, and I do intend to run it maxed out. Maybe might have to tweak the anti-aliasing a little bit, but for the most part, it ran very, very well on two 980s. It never went below 60 frames. It was mostly up around the 70 FPS mark, and it was using 2.5 gigabytes of video memory at 1440p. So using about an extra 500 to 600 megabytes of video memory there when you go from 1080 to 1440p, but still definitely playable, you know, even on max settings with the Hairworks features turned on and everything, getting, like I said, like around 60 to 70 FPS in that area at 1440p, and I can't wait to be able to get my Acer monitor so that I can play this game full-time in 1440, because I'm sure that the world detail and everything is just going to look phenomenal at that resolution. And even if you were playing on like two 780s or 780 Ti's, two 3 gigabyte cards, I'm sure you'd probably be okay running this game at 1440p, because once again, they just did a phenomenal job with optimizing this game in regards to video memory usage, which I just can't wrap my head around how they managed to do that. It's literally jaw-dropping how good this game looks and how well they've optimized it based on how it looks. I really can't recommend this game enough. It runs well. It looks fantastic, despite what anyone wants to say about downgrades or whatever. The game is absolutely beautiful. One of the most beautiful, if not the best looking open world games I've ever seen. And it performs well. The gameplay is awesome. The combat is great. And the story is just excellent. It's so good. It's got that, you know, level of like BioWare-y, like Mass Effect, Dragon Age type of, you know, character interaction and storytelling. But they do it in a different way where it's not as black and white as like a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age, where like, oh, this is the good decision and this is the bad decision. You're very much left to follow your own moral compass in that regard, and I really like that, because they don't tell you if this is a good option or a bad option. You might make a deal with someone to take like a job for them, and then you could find out afterwards that you were doing a job for a bad guy the entire time, and you didn't realize it, and then you might have to act accordingly afterwards based on that. I've seen that happen very early on in the game. And you are put into these moral conflicts all the time, and all these little decision making things that can affect the rest of the game based on the decisions that you make. And that's one of the things that The Witcher has always done better than a lot of games out there, in my opinion. And I can't wait to just dive into this game even further now once I get this video up and play it even more, because it's just great. And I wouldn't put a rating on it yet because I haven't completed the game. I'm not sure when I'll be able to get a full review for this game, because it's like over 100 hours in length, and I'm just going to try to enjoy it. And if I can get streaming to work today at some point with SLI, then I'm going to go ahead and stream it for you guys so you guys can watch me play and we can interact and hang out. So keep an eye out on social media and on the YouTube page. If I do decide to stream, I will post notifications everywhere for you guys if you do want to come and check out me playing the game. But that's going to wrap it up for this performance review. It's a little bit of a long one, but I hope you guys did enjoy this. If you did, please stick a like on it below, because it takes me a while to make these, and it really helps out my channel a lot. And if you want to know when the stream is going to be going live, make sure you're following me on Facebook or Twitter at JokerSlunt, and there's always going to be links down in the description below for that. So if you haven't picked up this game yet, you should definitely go ahead and do that. Beyond that, though, I will catch you slunts next time. Terra.